when I first started with music, all I'd listened to was gospel music. My father was a minister, and so it was a lot of gospel music in our house. The first song I think I remember as a secular song was by Sam Cooke, "You Send Me." And we had kind of a connection because his father was a minister, and we both came from a secular world. I mean, from a gospel world. So that's probably my first memory of, am I going to sing this music or am I going to sing gospel music? And always it's a little tussle back and forth. And it's not for the artists, it's the people around us. You know, they don't think we should be singing that kind of music because our gift was for God. I said, I think our gift was for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And when did you start singing? Were you very young?
16, professionally.
Professionally.
I started.
Before that, you were singing in church and stuff, right?
I'm sorry?
But before that, you were singing in church?
Just in church, yes. The music, I loved it because the music is really the same. Only thing is different is the lyrics. How you sing it, you know, you're singing to God for one lyric and you're singing to your people for the secular music. And I love them both. You know, and I just brought the talent that I had in church to the secular music, and most all of us did. The great recording artists today came from church.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like it. And so how did your pro recording career begin? You know, like how did you notice?
My greatest memory, Lou Adler and Herb Alpert. They were producers when I first met them. And Lou Adler was trying to get a hit record on Herb Alpert. This was in 1958, 59. And no matter what he did or what he recorded, nothing ever happened. But once Herb picked up his trumpet, then the rest is history. So I remember him, I think, more than anybody because we started out as background singers. And back then, our recording fee was $22.50 an hour. That was after our union. And Lou at that time and Herb didn't have any money. So they asked us if we would work for $5 an hour. So that's our joke. Sometimes it was almost for free because if it's a union session, being $22.50 an hour, it was a minimum of, you know, $50. So we weren't even getting $5 an hour from Lou. And today we're still friends, and thank God we can laugh at that because most people probably can't tell you that they did that, you know, when we started in this business. But it was fun and we were young. So, you know, we didn't really mind. And then we said, wow, we helped you to become stars for $5 an hour. So that's one of my favorite memories. It's always something, for me, it's always something funny. You know, my trouble didn't start till I met Phil Spector.
And how did it come to be that you're invited to join the Blossoms?
I was in high school and I was at my church. One of the ladies in the choir with me wanted me to sing at her wedding. And I said, okay. And at that wedding, 2 of the members of the Blossoms was in her wedding party. So I guess you could say I was giving them an audition by singing in the wedding. That was the first time they heard me. And at the reception, they asked me if I could sing secular music. And at that time, you know, you had to go by your parents. I don't know if my parents would let me sing, you know, secular music. And they convinced my mom and dad to let me start singing secular music. And it was great at that time because we were very well chaperoned. My parents knew their parents. And they asked me to join the group. They already had a lead singer, so they were really asking me to become a member of the group just to sing background with them. And once they heard me sing, they wanted me to sing lead. And that's probably, I could say, Singing with the Blossoms started me out singing lead for a group. And that kind of started our sound. And we got busier and busier. And that was a great thing for me to start off that way, because I had a lot of training, I tell people, in church, because we had to learn to sing harmony. And when you're with a choir, you know, and you sit in your own section, I was an alto, so I sat in the alto section. And then my sister was in the soprano section, and we went on from there. So it was a great thing for me to learn all that, not knowing that I could use that later on in my life.
Yeah. Well, you obviously learned very well, and those records are so good. The Blossoms records. I was just listening to them now again, and yeah, I mean, obviously, I love That's When the Tears Start. It's just so, like,
Yes, that was one of my favorite songs too when I was recording. I thought, oh, this is a cute little pop song. The problem with the Blossoms back in the late 50s and the early 60s, they did not know where to place us. You know, what kind of songs to write for us that would be a hit. You know, they recorded some great songs, but not what the audience wanted to hear. So we went from Capitol to RCA Victor to Challenge. We were all over the place, but nobody could fit us in a slot. And I loved all those songs because I think they were great. You know, everybody could sing them, you could dance to them. So, you know,
they couldn't market. I mean,
no, market. And at that time, you have to remember, most of the groups back then were all white. You know, the McGuire sisters, and they sung that beautiful three-part harmony. And, you know, the Blossoms could sing that, but we didn't sing that kind of music for records. You know what I'm saying? So they just couldn't find a slot for us. If you remember, I don't know how old you are.
I'm 29.
Oh my God, you're a baby. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Well, back then, they only had two radio channels, you know, the top 20 and the top 40. And it was regular, secular music. White was the AM station, and secular music black was also, but they never mixed. One station played all black and one station played all white. So that was another reason they had a hard time putting us somewhere.
Awful. But I still, you know, because those records sound, yeah, to my untrained ear, they sound, you know, like as catchy and as pop and as marketable as anything by, like, let's say the Supremes or whatever. I mean, I guess that was later on, wasn't it? You know,
Right.
A good 10 years later on.
Right. And you figure our music in the 50s was totally different from Motown. You knew Motown artists were black. You did not know the Blossoms were black until you saw us in person, because we didn't sound black like they supposedly, we're supposed to sound black because we are black. But our voices are pop voices. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and that made the difference. And back then, it was very white. Me and one of my best girlfriends, Bette Midler, laugh about the sound and how the white singers acted, you know, back in those days, you know. So it was a big difference, you know. But it was all right because they finally did find us a spot, you know. So it did work out.
Sure. Well, it certainly did. It certainly did. But it's just, you know, because I started listening to your solo material before I started listening to the Blossoms.
Okay.
So that was it was just interesting to hear those records, and they're so wonderful.
I'm probably the only one in the house besides you to still listen to those records, because I really do like them.
Yeah, well, they're fantastic. I mean, but obviously your solo career has since been amazing, and so how did that kind of evolve from being in the Blossoms?
Well, we met Phil Spector. Back before we met him, we worked for a gentleman named Lester Sill, who was Phil Spector's partner, but we didn't know that. And Phil was trying to get a record out. He's a rebel. That was already recorded by Linda Carr, but he wanted to get the record out first. So he came to California and asked his partner, did you know a singer who could sing this song I got? And Lester told him, yeah, well, Darlene Love could probably do it. Mind you, my name wasn't Darlene Love yet. Phil gave me that name, Love. Anyway, I met Phil, went into the studio, recorded the song in a couple of hours. And then the next time I heard it was on the radio under the name of the Crystals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's how fast, they put out records back in those days.
And-
Anyway, Phil was so hyped on getting that record out before Linda got hers out, so they could hear my version before they heard hers. And so that Snuff Garrett, who was a producer back in those days, was plenty mad, a word I can't say. So that was my beginning, and then it's amazing what happens when you have a hit record, even though it's not under your name. You hear yourself and you hear your voice and you go, wow, I sound pretty good.
So how come they didn't release it as a Darlene Love record?
Well, because Phil Spector already had the Crystals, and they were in New York. And they were very young, I think 13, 14, or 15. And I think that was the problem. Phil thought their voices were too young. And then when he met me, I was like 18 when I met Phil Spector, and had been singing. The training that I'd had, I said before, in church, I had a very mature voice for my age. And he wanted to put their record out because he had had sort of a hit with the Crystal. Wasn't big, but people knew the name The Crystals. So he thought the best way to do was put the record out under their name. And I did know it was going to be a record for the Crystals because I got paid well. But I didn't think it was going to be a hit anyway. I said, this ain't going to be no hit. So what's the difference? Let me just get paid.
Well, yeah.
My surprise.
I suppose. But then now when people are listening to it all those years later, you have to do your research. You have to know you have to know your pop music history to know that it's basically a Darlene Love record. And the Crystals have some great records of
yes.
their own,
And I think that's the reason why he wanted to put He's a Rebel out under their name.
Yeah.
Because Blossoms weren't known yet. The Blossoms were great background singers, but we hadn't crossed over yet as a recording group and having a hit record. And even with that, what Phil did, he signed me up and just one of the Blossoms, because I told him, well, we all have to go together. We're a group, so he made the Blossoms did my background. But Phil never said anything about that. It was just Darlene Love. But they didn't for years say anything about background singers. Now they do. So, and you can't fool disc jockeys. You really can't. They play too many records. They know voices, a voice that they like, they hear, it's tuned in their head. So they were saying, well, who is that singing He's a Rebel? That's not one of the Crystals. That girl's voice sounds much different from the Crystals. They had a great record called Uptown, which was a great record. Then He Kissed Me, you know what I'm saying? But they didn't sound like Darlene Love. So they said to themselves, maybe it's one of the other girls. Because at that time, nobody knew who was the lead singer in the Crystals. So that got a little confusing after a while because, well, who else sings in the group? Sings lead. But it wasn't until 1964, really, when people started finding out it was Darlene Love that was singing He's a Rebel.
On that, yeah.
I had the two #1 big hits with the Crystals. He's a Rebel and He's Sure the Boy I Love. And then after that, they kind of just faded out of the picture. Phil Spector was one of those guys. He kind of knew his ear. He had such a wonderful trained ear for sound and songs. And he figured after that, the next time he recorded the Crystals was on the Christmas album. And it wasn't all of the Crystals because we did all the background for the record. So it was just Lala Brooks who was singing the Crystals, Christmas songs. And then after that, that was it for the Crystals, recording wise.
Yeah. And so yeah, you sound like a very kind of relaxed about the fact like those two #1 hits were put out under a different name, because there are a lot of people who would be bit, you know, a bit frustrated about that in hindsight, you know. At the
It
time,
was
obviously, you
for,
want to be
yeah,
paid.
it was for a while, mostly on the Crystal's part. I was like, listen, it's not my fault. Don't get mad at me. You know, you have to go to Phil Spector. He did it. You know what I'm saying? It got back in, say, like around 65, 66, they started finding out that that wasn't a Crystal's. So like you said, people started doing their research and they found out it wasn't them. So whenever they go and do a show or go and talk to disc jockeys or whatever, now tell us the truth. Who's really singing lead on that song, you know? And they started saying it was the Crystals that did the original record, which it didn't really bother anybody. It didn't bother us. We all knew who did it, you know. But it was kind of a hard place to put them in, you know, especially when they had no idea. When that record, the funniest thing about He's a Rebel, when that record was put out, it went to #1 so fast that the Crystals tell the story of being on the road and heard their record out, and they didn't know it. They didn't know the song. Phil didn't even tell them that the song was out. And it was, people wanted to hear He's a Rebel, and they couldn't sing the song because they didn't know it.
Oh,
so that would make kind of like a tricky situation for a group, you know, knowing that's not them, but trying to make people believe it's them. The funny part about that too, when they would do TV shows, and you know how you had to lip sync?
yeah.
For lip syncing to the original record, which was me.
Yeah.
So I see, you can go on YouTube and see that, and it's really funny. You know, I mean, here we are. I mean, we're 50 some odd years later. Who cares?
Yeah.
We got paid, and now today we actually get wonderful residuals from it.
Yeah. So that's well, that's a very very good attitude to have. And so, when was the first time you released a single under your own name?
Right after that, He Should Have Brought Love was supposed to be my record, and he changed his mind. And my first record with Phil Spector was it was in 1964. After all, we did all the other, I used to think that we were with Phil Spector for years, but we did it so much recording with him, like 61 to 64. That's the most recording that we did with Phil Spector. So we'd go into the studio and put our songs on, and we didn't really know at that time whose record it was going to be because he wouldn't tell us.
So, and you guys, and so you, with Phil Spector, you know, some of the records that you sang on, some pretty seminal recordings, like including Be My Baby. You know, some people say that is the best pop record of all time. Apparently, you know, Brian Wilson kind of played it all day, every day, just for years and years and years, trying to imitate it. And That's Life by Frank Sinatra and Monster Mash and all sorts of incredible recordings. Did you have a great time singing on all of those?
Oh yeah, because we knew we were on all those records. That's what made it really exciting. And then when we got to meet all those people, like meet Frank Sinatra, we worked for Nancy Sinatra for a couple of years. And we ended up meeting Frank because we were working with Nancy. So during that time, we're talking about in the 70s, and you get to meet Frank Sinatra. That was like, whoa, yes. So we had a lot of fun singing those songs. Our sessions were great. You know, back then, everything was done at one time. The lead singing, the background, the band, the strings, everything was done at the same time. Not like today, where you can put your voice on in California and record it again in New York, you know. So it was very interesting, you know, because most of the time we worked with the same musicians, because the Blossoms did everybody's background, and the musicians, the Wrecking Crew, did everybody's records. So we were together a lot. So we had a wonderful time back in those days.
And for those listeners, you know, of mine who aren't familiar with the legendary Wrecking Crew, you know, we're talking about people like Glenn Campbell, right, or Leon Russell, or, you know, Hal Blaine, these type of session players who played like you sang on all these recordings. They played the instruments on them, and Incredible records. And what do you have more fondness for? Your run of singles around that time, or these fantastic sessions as well?
I had to work real hard with Phil Spector when we were recording my things. But when we would go and work for other producers and sing background on theirs, it was easy and it was a lot of fun because they wanted us. That's like, what do you hear here? Should we put an ooh here or ah? Come on, girls, tell us what we should do with this. So we were really arranging background sessions at the sessions, which, you know, we didn't think about it then, what we were actually doing. So it was more fun because we got to sit down with the artists and the producer and the musician. So we were actually working hand in hand with everybody was, you know, to put their put in what you know, what we should do. So it was always a lot of fun. It was a lot of creating back in those days.
Yeah. Do you think that something is lost now by the fact that it's much rarer for records to be recorded live?
Very rare, very rare. I recorded, oh gosh, it's like almost 3 years ago now, my first album in many years with Stevie Van Zandt.
Yeah, that's a fantastic album.
And we did all of that in pieces. It's amazing, you know. He bring the rhythm section in and he records it, and then the horns, and then the string, and then background. And a lot of times, Stevie, he'd like to have the lead voice on so the background singers can hear what the lead singer was doing, and that helps. But nobody sits in a room anymore and everybody records at the same time. It's always done in pieces. I'm wondering when they're gonna go to the moon and do it.
Yeah, it's so different. And yeah, so that album that you released in 2015, introducing Darlene Love, so when did you first meet Steve and start working with him?
Oh, before we did that album, I met Steve about 20 years before that, probably a little longer. I told him I have to just find a number. Yeah. But my solo, trying to get my solo career going in LA, Lou Adler had a club in Los Angeles, and he let me do a show there. And in the audience was Steve Van Zandt and Bruce Springsteen. They were there at that show. And I'm wondering today, how in the world did you get they to come in to see me? And not knowing that they were fans of mine, you know, because of Phil Spector. And after the show was over, Stevie Van Zandt said, you need to move to New York. So, I mean, we're talking about the early 80s, you know, when I first met him. And I did eventually move to New York because of Stevie.
Wow.
And that's a whole nother story. But he always said he wanted to record me. That was his life dream, to record Darlene Love. And I think other than the Phil Spector singles, because there was mostly singles that we were doing back then, I think that's one of the greatest, you know, albums that I have ever recorded. And if they would have pushed it normally like they was to do, promote the record, I think it would have been an unbelievable selling record. But I say it's never too late.
No, it isn't. It is never too late. And also when people, you know, it's finding out that story. It's such a great story, you know, that he was a fan because of all the iconic things that you did in the 60s. He came to check out a show because you were making a comeback, right? Because in the 70s you took some time off from the music industry.
Yes, because, you know, when you have children, you kind of want to have your hands on them, you know, hands on with your kids. And they were growing up and they were growing up without their mother, even though I was home a lot too. You know, I wasn't doing a whole lot of traveling, but I was gone. When I was doing sessions, I might do a session at 10 o'clock in the morning and not get home before 1 in the morning. So, you know, I wanted a hands-on, I want to be home for a while. But then I found out I started traveling and the kids just started going with me. So it became a family affair before people really started taking their children out on the road. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. I would tell my producer, well, if you want me out here, my kids got to come too. It's not a great feeling to have to be away from your kids. And you feel like you have to make up for being away, you know? So it became really great when I was able like I sung background with Tom Jones and Dionne Warwick for 10 years. And because Dionne Warwick became a friend and she had children, she know, well, bring the kids with you, you know, because her kids were there. So it made it all right, you know. So luckily everything worked out okay. I didn't start my career, solo career, actually until, you know, the 80s. You know, and I was really blessed to be able to start a solo career after everything that went down with background singing, because people tend to want to keep you in one spot. You know, you're a great background singer, so we need you for this record. We need you, you know, well, I couldn't do both of them at the same time. Some of them I did, like I did a lot of background for Luther Vandross and for Aretha Franklin. And I really just made time for them because I wanted to sing on their records.
Yeah. But so apart from that, were you in the 80s, you know, you were focusing on your own records, right?
Yes.
And you know, do you have fond memories, for example, of making Paint Another Picture?
Oh yeah, those were great records, you know, but timing, like Bruce Springsteen says all the time, timing is so perfect in this business. You know, your eggs have to be all set in as he says, the stars have to be aligned, you know, because you don't just have a hit record. It's a lot of promoting to be done, and more than ever today, because people don't know, back in the day, we used to go on a tour to disc jockeys, radio stations. And that was a tour we used to do to promote our record. And now you have to really be up on doing all these scientific things that we're doing today. And, you know, I've had to learn how to do a whole lot of things with this computer. Look at us. You're in Italy.
Yeah.
I'm in New York.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how
changes, you know, and if you've been in it from the change, I started in 58 and now here it is 2020. So I saw a lot of the changes that were made in this music.
Yeah, I mean,
all my friends too are musicians, you know, they're dead, they've gone on. That's why I say I feel very blessed to be able to still be in the music and still have my voice. So I feel very, very blessed because those were our friends. Those were the people we hung out with. You know, if somebody had a barbecue or we were all at their houses, you know what I'm saying? So we were all the people, Lou Adler, I mean, the great records we did with him once he became a great producer. I mean, he was already a great producer, but Jan and Dean, the Mamas and the Papas, I mean, Johnny Rivers, those were great, great records that today you can actually put them on and listen to them and go, yes, you know.
Still sound amazing.
We lost a lot of our friends in the last, you know, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. And you know, you've been involved in you know, popular music really since it kind of started. So,
yes.
What an incredible.
And I didn't know when I was with Phil Spector, people were listening to Darlene Love, like Elton John, you know, Bruce, you know, Stevie Wonder, you know, and I'm going, wow, you guys listen to my records? I listen to yours. So you don't really know, but I have been there from the beginning, you know, when it was all very segregated. Like I said, they only played black records on one station and white records on another station. So I saw all that come together and I saw it change where now everybody is on the same page, which is fabulous.
Yeah, and the way it should be. But I mean, what an incredible series of changes that you've lived through, and it's been, you know, amazing to release that record produced by Steve, having met him in the 80s. And
yes.
So when did he first tell you, you know, you know, I'd love to work with you and make a full album?
I'm telling you, that night we met at the club in
Oh, right.
California. That night he said, you need to move to New York. I really would like to record you. And him and Bruce were like trying to still find their way separately. You know, how Stevie could start his singing career and because he was with Bruce. That was it. When Bruce called, everybody ran.
Yeah.
You know, so But he found a way. He had that in his mind. The first thing we did was the big collaboration on You Can't Sing in Sun City. And it was about 50 of us on that record. And then even after that, it still took a lot of years for him to get, to me to record me, because even during that time, he got the television series.
Yeah.
So doing all that. So finally, he said, well, let's go to we were singing one night. And he said, what are you guys doing Monday? We said, well, nothing. That's our day off. He said, no, we're going into the studio. That's literally how it started. And then he added, let's hope Bruce doesn't call to tell us we're going back out on the road. So we were actually able to finish and do the whole album without any interruption, which was great. Who wants to start it and then have to stop and then start and stop? But we were really blessed to be able, because Bruce didn't go back out on the road for about another year or so after that. So we had plenty time to finish that album. So that was really great. You find your niche, you get the right musicians, the right singers, and so you're there for weeks and weeks and weeks. So you can really get a rhythm and a feeling to do the whole thing at one time rather in pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds great, and yeah, I can imagine it being much better than it being interrupted like that.
Yeah,
and
you have to get back into the mood.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
Oh God, what they're gonna do? Because I forgot who it was, the disc jockey that was on television that Bruce really loved. Oh, I can't remember who it is. Anyway, maybe it'll come to me. And they said that Bruce said, okay, we're doing so and so show. This is the last night. We're going to do it. And everybody was like, what? And everybody came together to do that show. So if you have a boss like Bruce, he's the boss, because they love him and they love the music, and everybody, it's amazing how great those musicians were, because they all have a career.
Yeah, they all do. Definitely.
They all back to Bruce, and it worked out great. Every one of those musicians that Bruce had have their own career.
Yeah. And they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame separately, weren't they? The E Street Band.
Yeah.
Well deserved. And also, I mean, Steve in The Sopranos, that's a very iconic performance.
Yeah, Barry, I think that was for everybody. He said, well, one of these days we're going to do that album. And we did, and it almost had to happen like that, because you can't, unfortunately, in our business, you can't find the time. You have to make the time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so is it gratifying when people like, Bruce Springsteen or like Elton John and these types of artists, tell you how much, and Stevie Wonder, how much, your music means to them and stuff, is it expected? It seems like you've got a very modest view of
no, I didn't. I really didn't expect it, because I mean, you think of Bruce, and a matter of fact, I told Bruce, I didn't know his name. I thought his name was Boss, because that's what everybody ever come, the boss. I was like, who is the boss? They'd say, that's Bruce Springsteen. You love their records, and then to find out that they love you too is like, wow, really? It actually, for me, it's humbling to know somebody like those great artists, because they are. But then to find out they came up the same way. You know what I'm saying? Started out digging, producing their own records. It never happens. Your first record is very rarely not the first record.
Yeah. And so this series is called Greatest Music of All Time. And I always finish the interviews by asking people, who for you are the greatest artists of all time? Because everybody's got a different answer, but who are the artists that have kind of meant the most to you over your career?
Well, the one that comes up to me is always Aretha Franklin. And it might be because she started in church too. And who knew she was going to become a secular artist? Because even with Aretha, I think that's why I really feel a kindred to her. because when she went to Columbia Records, they didn't really know how to record her. You know, her first album with them wasn't that big because it was like a sort of a jazz album, you know. But then they found her, they found that niche, that voice where she could bring out the gospel in her, you know. And those records are timeless, you know. Like they say my records are, but I say, really? Like Aretha?
Well, I think they are
they had a lot to do, you know, with me finding out who I was. You know, I'm not Aretha, but look what she does as Aretha. I can do the same thing as Darlene Love, you know. And
there's a lot of similarity between you you both as you know as vocalists, and that parallel that you're drawing is really interesting. Yeah. Like,
and we're friends. That's the great thing. We became friends, all of us. You have your career, I have mine. Nobody is fighting, you know, because we're loving what we do. And Aretha put a whole stamp on music, as far as I'm concerned. You know, everybody tries to be Aretha. Now the problem is you cannot be Aretha. It's only one. Do what you do. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Nobody wants another Aretha. You think they do, but they really don't. You know, they need that new person now. You know, you can sing her songs. I get amazed, you know, people sing her songs or on TV shows or sing Whitney Houston's song. Oh, you sound just like her. Yeah, but it's only one, you know. You mean you're going to build your whole career sounding like them? I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, you need to do something different. I mean, even that performance that Aretha did of Natural Woman at the Kennedy Center thing that went viral, so good. I just couldn't stop playing it.
And me too.
I prefer listening to that performance of it
rather than it. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. You know what? Everybody sings the national anthem, right? But Whitney Houston sang the you know what out of the album, you know, at the Super Bowl game.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, really? Everybody has sung this song, but you really sang this song, you know. How do you compare yourself? You know what I'm saying? Just be you, be who you are. And that's what she did. And that thing almost went, I don't think it did, but it could have been a #1 record, but I know it's sold great.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is, who else sung the national anthem and they put it out as a single?
Yeah. Well, and those videos, you know, just went kind of viral around the internet. Everybody was watching them, and you had a fabulous piano player as well. Like when she was playing Natural Woman and the White House performance. I really like that kind of style on the piano. Incredible. Well, Darlene, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And actually, I have one final question. Of all the recordings that you've done, like all of your singles, or you can name an album, you know, if it's introducing Darlene Love even, is there a kind of track that you would highlight as your favorite, even if it's like a deep cut?
Yeah, there was one song that I really do love, and I still love it today. We were with Reprise when the Blossoms recorded it, and it's called Good Lovin'. And I love that song even today. Sometimes I could actually put it on and think about how long ago that song was recorded. But that is probably, out of all the records that I've done, you know, Good Lovin' is probably my favorite. And of course, it's the B-side. It wasn't a hit record. But my husband says all the time, you know, the records that he loved was not the hit record. It was the B-side.
B-side. Right, well, I've actually got that to listen to right now. So thanks so much, Darlene. I really appreciate it, and you know, take care.
Yes, and you too. Just be safe. What they say: wash your hands, wear your mask, and
keep your distance.
Keep your distance.
Well,
God bless.
God bless. Thanks, Darlene. Bye.
Okay. Bye.